in CTO of Henderson Engineers. Uh, I've been like dying to know so many interesting applications you have built from your career till date as a CTO role, how you make frameworks for decisions, what to build, what not to build, and how do you navigate a long cycle. So I'm looking forward to know your thoughts on your journey, your thinking.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We're working on that right now, actually. So in physics, they talk about problems like having symmetries. So like these are symmetrical problems. Like a skater spinning around is a symmetrical problem to a universe spinning, and so you can use the same equations. So we're looking at like what types of problems are symmetrical. And so, like, a lot of things are pathfinding problems. Like, almost everything's a pathfinding problem.
Mm,
So then we're trying to say, okay, like, if everything's a pathfinding problem, then solving any of them is a good first step because then we kind of could solve all of them.
mm,
But things that are like make this report are way lower priority, right? Because it's a one-off tool. So the only thing that overrules symmetry is if making that report happens to be like the most profitable thing we could do. We'll
mm.
make the report. But all things being equal, we look for those symmetries and solve those.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, so before we go to what kind of work do you do now, it would be great if you can walk us like your early career days right after college. What were some highlights and pivotal moments till date?
Yeah, I have a weird career. So I'm a good example of a non-linear career path. So I have a architectural engineering degree from Kansas State, and then I went to work for a company doing biotech manufacturing, and I was a process engineer, like designed industrial heating and cooling systems, like really low temperature cooling systems. And then from there, I went and taught at Kansas State in engineering, and then I became an energy modeler from there. And then I went to Henderson to be director of sustainability. And then I ran our commissioning team. And then we bought a construction company and put commissioning over there. So I stayed on the engineering side and took over quality. And then quality slowly morphed over time into design tools, which slowly morphed into technology. And now I've become the CTO and taken over our software group and our IT group. And we're putting all of that together to kind of point the whole thing at solving problems for the company, like moving from a utility to a support for the products we make. That's what we're doing right now. So that's the very short version of I've done a lot of jobs.
Amazing. Yeah, kind of connect because uh, coming from architectural engineering background, it's you always battle between the creative side and in the
Yeah.
engineering side. And I'm curious, what were the skills you had to learn to prepare for this role? Things you learned
Mm.
the hard way, which is not it's not a straightforward path.
So I'm not. I would not say I'm a good um, software developer, right? Like I'm not a software developer, but I learned how software development works, and what I figured out. Speaking of symmetries, I figured out it's very math based, and I understood the math. So I spent way more time on the algorithms and like the architecture of software, and I would say I barely learned Python just so I could understand structured language, but that's not. Uh, you do not want me to code on your project. That's not the right answer. And then the most interesting part to me is kind of tying it all together with infrastructure and like what's the right data architecture and data engineering, and like just learning how all the pieces fit together was really challenging. But that's kind of what I did during COVID. When when we were all at home and there's downtime, I would just take classes and just learn as much as I could and read as much as I could. And then what's been interesting is you talked about the creative side, like understanding enough, having enough domain expertise on the software and infrastructure and data side and then like pretty deep expertise on the problem side has allowed me to come up with like creative solutions to solving problems because I know the tools that are available. And even though I don't know how to build them, like no one is an expert in everything. And so I just assembled a team to put the things together, but understand the problem space really well, which has been super helpful.
God. And just made me think, having just enough knowledge about like programming, knowing, because then if the domain expertise provides a lot of insights on what to build, and then if you have that intuition, okay, maybe this feature or product could take 1 month or 6 months, and
Mm-hmm.
then scoping it out, it's kind of reminds me of a product manager role where
Mm-hmm.
you are the person coordinating and identifying what to build is the most difficult thing, I think.
Yeah, it's at least a difficult thing. I don't know if it's the most difficult. Like they each have their own difficulties, but it is a hard thing.
Yeah, so how do you prioritize, and what's your framework?
Mm. Prioritize which things, like my time.
Like what to build, what automation.
Yeah, it's like I said before. So we started with operational things. I kind of skipped that part. And we would, like most companies, our financial data and our client data was the most structured and organized. And we have 30 years of timesheet data, and like that's
Mm,
all super organized and structured. So we started with that to do like all of our proof of concepts were on financial data. So we built a tool to predict whether or not we're going to win a proposal. We built a tool
mm,
to predict time series distribution of how a project will bill. We're just about finished with one that predicts time series distribution of how we'll spend time on a project. So predict the length and predict the distribution of time. Like that's where we do all of our proof of concepts. And now, like next year, we're really shifting towards building design, like client facing tools. So taking all the calculations we do and all the design problems and turning those into um, really turning them into code so that we can run them, so we can optimize around things. Like right now, we don't optimize very much, but if you can pull all those calculations, I should put a post on LinkedIn. But if you pull all those into a weight on an edge in a graph algorithm, then you can optimize the pathfinding in that using
mm-hmm.
that graph between using the all the calculations are coming up with weights on the edges between all the nodes. That's just like a totally different way of thinking about design than like what's the answer. It's like the answer is dependent on the coefficients you put in front of all the weights. Like how are you
Mm-hmm.
optimizing it? So the which design tool we build, I go back to those symmetry things and we look for symmetrical problems and we're trying to tackle those first. But we're definitely shifting from operations to design, and that will probably deprioritize operations tools and spend our time on design tools, design products, really.
God. And maybe if you can share how a week in your life look like, what are the different hats you wear?
Yeah. So I asked ChatGPT, I put in there what I do, and it said I am a combination of CIO, CTO, chief data officer, and chief product officer. So it
Mm.
depends on the week. So like the last week, like really the last 3 days, I've just been looking at the equations that we use to calculate pressure loss in a refrigeration system because it has two-phase flow, it has solid, or it has liquid and vapor. So I've just been like diving into those equations and then thinking about where does that information come from in design, and should that be like properties in a Revit family, should be user input, like what's the architecture of that specific problem. But it, like I literally got out my old mechanical engineering handbook, finding
Mm.
like pressure loss equations and like mapping it all out. So that was like super detailed. And then sometimes it'll be like more high level strategy with other executives and just saying, how do we want to spend money? Like, what do we think this will cost to build? What do we think the return on that is? If we sold it externally, what's the potential available market? And it's all over the place. Depends on the week. Depends on which of those jobs I'm doing.
Yeah, it's quite like flexible, and depending on the need, you wear that hat. And how do you think about hiring? Because
Mm.
I always had this question where, okay, do you hire like a software developer from another domain, but then the resource cost is very high, or do you internally train them? Like, there's so many choices.
So again, depends on the segment. If it so we split um, engineering and computational thinking expertise from software development expertise, and so we just formed a new role actually that we're going to hire for to manage the team that turns engineering design workflows into like charters for software. So that way we can hire people who have software development expertise with very little engineering expertise because it's a well-defined problem and it's variable types and ranges and all that stuff spelled out. They just have to build the code. So that helps because then we can hire from two different pools. We don't have to find people with huge engineering expertise and are good software developers, which I think is what gets most people in trouble.
Mm,
But it's hard to find those translator people too. That's a hard role to fill for. So I end up doing a lot of that too. Like the senior people on my team will get in and do that just because we have more years of experience. So that's one thing. And then as far as what type of person do I hire, like um, everything is behind like integrity. So if I
mm,
feel like this person has the best interests of the team in mind, but they're short on some skill set, but they seem capable of learning it, like we can learn that. But I've gotten in trouble. Most people have gotten in trouble hiring experts that are ego driven and
mm,
don't have the best interests of the team in mind. So I will hire somebody with less experience and more integrity than the other way around.
I see. Uh, what are your uh, examples of innovation in engineering look like?
Mm.
If you were to take, like, gi- give us few examples.
Yeah, so this is actually really hard because most of the tools we've come up with, our users don't want to use them, like
I,
everybody. so I have some, but I would be overstating it if I said these would like change the world, right? So the one that I think is the best proof of concept we came up with that we have used, like we have projects where we've done this and successfully installed stuff, and I would argue it worked really well, but for whatever reason, it hasn't taken hold. We modularized ductwork and then said you can only design this specific situation with 16 by 16 square duct, 5 feet long with one takeoff. And we have that situation a lot. Like if we did that on all our projects, we would use hundreds of thousands of that 5 foot piece of duct, right? Like the situation happens all the time. And then we came up with an optimization algorithm that said route the, given a user dragging a main routing, it would connect all the branches to use the least possible branch
Mm,
ductwork. So it would decide which diffuser should go to which branch, and then it would optimize the number of modules in the run. And it was really slick. Like it took 3 seconds or 4 seconds or something to do that. And the reason it works so well is because we modularized the duct, which made it a way easier optimization problem to say you could do a takeoff every 5 feet than every 5 millimeters or whatever, like what infinite number of spots. So that worked really well. We did it on a project. We modularized the duct. We had it made off site and shipped, and it's all the same part. It's reusable. I think that's a really cool example of what could be done, but we haven't done that at a big scale yet. And then everything else falls in the category of automations. It's just a little step, like like a lot of Revit actions we've automated, so you don't have to do those. But most people are doing that kind of thing. Some of them are Dynamo, some of them are C#, but they're just like procedural automations around design. We
mm,
haven't. We're just now getting into like let's really change the way we design because we can do things differently with structured language than you can with like clicking, clicking and dragging, right?
got
Yeah.
it. And
Honest answer, but nothing,
no, no,
nothing going to change the world there.
that's interesting. Like, and any areas which you think there's still room for improvement or opportunities for innovation,
Oh my gosh,
which
yeah,
no
all of
one
them.
is.
Nobody's done anything. So if you can switch to this pathfinding optimization and weights on edges, then you can optimize duct systems for carbon, like embodied carbon, for weight, for
Mm,
cost, for pressure drop. Like just that, does that one use case is hugely impactful, right? And then you can do that for conduit, you could do it for pipe, you can do it for waistlines, you can do it for everything. And then you can optimize those things against each other and do like multi-system optimization. And then you can change the weights. Like you can sit there with the client and say, you value this more than this. Um, if you do that enough times, then you build up a database of possible outcomes and selected answers. Then you can just start to predict, if you set the settings this way, this is the right duct routing, right? So, I mean, nobody's even like scratched the surface of what's possible because we're just automating existing workflows like that. That's like nothing, like who cares? If you automate the way you're working, that's so much less interesting than doing it a million times, or a selective subset of a million times and then optimizing around some cost function. That's a huge difference. I haven't seen anybody do that yet. Maybe Thornton Tomasetti a little bit on structural, on beam sizing, but they're more, as far as I understand it, predicting member sizes and then like back calculating whether or not it meets the design intent. But I don't know if they're really optimizing. That'd be an interesting question for them.
yeah, like I've seen one of the tool which does multi-objective, and then you can trace various design parameter selection and what. But yeah, that made me wonder, like like what are the solutions a firm should develop internally versus
Mm.
MEP startups leave it for them and then adopt third party.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work. Most MEP firms don't have the software development expertise, and most software developers don't have the engineering expertise. Like there aren't a
Yeah.
lot of people who did this for 25 years and then said, I'm going to go run a software company, right? There's a lot of people who
Mm,
have 3 to 5 years. Like they understand what design is, but they
yeah.
don't have the depth of experience. And then they also don't have the data and they don't have the projects. So they have to design their tools generically to work on any project instead of saying, let's just fix the data structure and then work within that data structure. That's why Thornton Tomasetti could build things, is because they had projects. So I think it's a hard thing to unlock, to have expertise in both camps and access to projects that you can control the structure of. So if somebody could do that, I'd buy their tool. But most of them are generic and then don't work with our projects very well or don't solve our problems.
Nice. So, do you think most of the like MEP firms don't have the R&D budget to hire software engineers, which um, like then it leads to missing opportunities of very niched, automated or optimized solutions for that task, and startups don't have the data. So, like,
Yeah, yeah. This
yeah.
is where I get into a little bit of like trouble, because I think that people focus too much on ROI. Engineering firms
Mm,
say like only build tools that have a set ROI, and so what they end up with are automations, like plotting automations and things, like that. You could calculate the ROI on that pretty easily, and so that's all they built. And I it's not that I don't care about ROI. I just think it's the least interesting part of the question. You just need to find things that are so obviously good that you just do them, right? And it doesn't cost $100 million to build the tools we're building. It might cost two. And so if you're a firm of enough size, you could probably come up with $2 million to totally change the game
mm,
and change it for all your competitors and like elevate your product. Like I think we just aren't willing to invest the money because we don't know what the good questions are. So we're not willing to take a risk because the ideas aren't obviously good.
nice. Yeah, and I haven't even seen more precedents like so. Thornton Thomasat is in structural, and like there are few architecture firms like, but in we need like either through through FOMO. If a competitor firm is putting much on
Hmm.
R&D and maybe using tech or innovation, they're getting more projects, and either they're forced to spend more on innovation, or
Yeah,
I think it's also a mindset shift. Yeah. Mm.
yeah,
It's a tough
yeah.
problem.
I'm
Like
trying
so,
to get us.
uh,
Yeah.
no,
Okay, go
please
ahead.
continue. Yeah.
I'm trying to get us to think differently about what our product is, and then that drives the development. So I don't think it's very useful to focus huge in development investment on automating the current way of working.
I think I lost connection. Uh,
Are you
can you
back?
hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yes, 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 yeah. So,
Yeah.
I was about to ask, like, okay, one is like bottoms up innovation development coming from firm side. Another is like from startup side, and also part of me, like coming from the startup world, like making $1 billion MEP innovation is also it's a very challenging task, like the
Mhm.
revenue, and if you do the math, so enough VC money is not also coming in this particular area. We see a lot of construction tech, and then
Mhm.
design tech, but MEP tech sector, I'm not sure it's funded that much comparatively.
Yeah, I mean the so what's your addressable market, right? Like it's not everyone who would use ChatGPT. It's like a
Mm,
much smaller thing. So I think it goes back to your question of startup outside of a company or startup inside of a company. Like if you build a tool and then start using that to do design and your margins are really high on design services, that's a much bigger addressable market. You're not selling software to people who are designing, you're selling design services to people who are building at higher margins. And then that's, I think, how you could get $1 billion valuation because you're
mm,
showing you've changed the market. You've moved it to people who build things, which is bigger.
I see.
Yeah.
Dustin, what are your thoughts on AI? Like now it's such a big buzzword.
Yeah.
Uh, what are
I
your
so I
yeah?
joke anybody in my role should just take whatever they were doing and rename it the AI plan. That's what I think of AI. You'll get funded. Uh, so it's like AI has been happening. That's not. It's not like there is an AI that we should all use to do things. It's all these things we've been talking about are facets of this AI toolkit. So, what do I think about large language models is different than what do I think about AI. And I think large language
Mm,
models probably have use cases. It probably improves a user interface for design tools at some point. It's probably knowledge navigation tool at some point. But I'm of the opinion that I'm just waiting for the costs to come down. I mean, there's 10 or 12 people developing the exact same product and competing against each other. I The use case for us is not strong enough to get married to one of those yet. Uh, I think it's a little bit of a risk the industry's taken there when they say, we've got AI, we built this internal chatbot to help us navigate our knowledge base. I'm like, okay, like most people's questions aren't that hard. Like
mm,
honestly, most of the questions they they can find an answer, or it's better to have a relationship with somebody right now to help them with the answer. Like it required mentorship. Eventually, those will be useful, but we're not. I'm not diving into that piece yet. We have too many other things, which I would also call AI. We have too many other things to solve before we do that.
I see.
Yeah,
So, like, when you refer the earlier example, is it like RAG that finds MEP
hmm,
details based on the like internal chatbot? Okay, so like
yeah.
those were some low-hanging fruits
They
from
are
yeah.
if you have all of your stuff organized.
Yes.
So who has all of their stuff organized? Like no one does. So what we're working on, like if you get design tools, you can build data governance and structuring into the tools, and over time things get more and more organized because the tools are controlling the back end. Like the user experience works in the front end, the tools are controlling what happens in the back end, and you build that structure, then it's much easier to navigate because you have it all structured. And it is interesting. What happened 20 years ago is interesting. What happened in the last 3 years is probably relevant. So we don't need to navigate a lot of that stuff. And then the other thing is we just have really good designer support tools that are fairly easy to navigate. We don't have all of our knowledge base in just one big lump or in 1,000 lumps spread around our intranet. We have it organized and you can navigate to what you want and read about it. So for us, it's not that big of a problem. I don't know, not big of an opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, but it's quite uh, insightful the way, like, a lot of people talk about the AI application layer, but we don't have enough discussions on the data strategy layer. How are we getting
Yeah,
unstructured data in a structured format to make it
right,
LLM or multimodal ready? Like the foundation itself is not organized, and it
right,
requires a lot of non ROI work, a lot of labor in setting
correct.
up the systems.
And I don't think very many design firms are going to do $100 million training efforts on deep learning models. It's just like
Yeah.
we're just not going to do that. So you have to have fairly structured data. Like, I don't know. Maybe I just don't know what I'm doing, but I haven't seen any way around that issue yet with the budgets we have to work with.
Mm. So I'm seeing like some of the tasks which are being like automated, either using algorithm or in the form of API, and then like AI agents, which is like very like getting popular in like doing unit testing or software
Mm-hmm.
automation script. Just made me curious to know your thoughts. Which of the mechanical or like MEP engineering task can be automated with an API and which can't, and like AI agents or workflow automations?
So I think I think the answer to that is that the hardest things to automate are network architecture decisions. So how do you want this distribution system to work? Is it one front end thing? Is it two? Does that go to, 3 branch panels? Is it like that network architecture piece is hard to automate because you're going from infinitely many options to like, this is what I want to test. I think downstream of that, everything is either a packing problem where it say fit these diffusers in the ceiling, or it's a pathfinding problem, and those are you can optimize those. So I think what we'll do is have the design engineer maintain like a table of design parameters, like this is the acceptable velocity for this pipe or whatever, and a network architecture setup. And then they'll say, here's 6 or 7 possible good network architectures. Show me the optimum system distribution layout for each of these network architectures, and then they'll pick. So I think it's like a combination of like how far down do you go in the design process. That first step is obviously human right now, and the last step's obviously a computer. And I think we can go all the way up to network architecture with like graph algorithms and nodes and edges. I think it's the same pathfinding stuff.
Yeah. So still, because of the complexity of the decisions which can affect a lot of things downstream, we need
Mm-hmm.
human in the loop at few of this, and then the optimization task is straightforward. Once we have the parameters narrowed down to a point, then simulation and finding is there. But you can't start with an infinite option space.
Right. Oh, and then an interesting thing, a thing a startup doesn't have, is a good way to guess what the load will be. So we have lots and lots of projects, and like we could say with a high degree of accuracy what the heat load is going to be for a classroom in a certain city, right? Like just do that. So if you can predict load density, then you can optimize system layouts without knowing the details of the design. So without giving too much away, like we have a theory of how you attack design problems that allows us to design the whole thing with flexibility to connect the endpoints as they settle down. And you have to have something like that too. You can't just say automate it. You have to say, well, assume this to start with, and that assumption is based on everything we've already done.
Mhm. And there might be also few decisions which could be, if that is wrong, has costly implications. So
Yeah. So optimization too isn't like what is the best, it's what are the top 10 best. And then a person
mm,
can look at those and say, well, I know something I didn't tell you, so I'm going to pick the third best, not the first best, because there's going to be a hole in the ceiling there where you put this thing. And I didn't tell you that, but I know it's going to be there. So there's certain things like people can override because you don't have total information in the system. And I think that's always okay. But
I
yeah, that's a good point. Optimum is not best. This is your out of 20 million, here's the top 10. That's a pretty
mm,
good start, right? Yeah.
got it. Uh, have you seen like any good automation in the construction drawing space? Or
I mean, probably. I haven't paid attention to it because they all solve specific problems. So everybody wants to solve one problem out of hundreds and then sell that product. And that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't make sense to me because it's very difficult to integrate that in with other tools, solving other
oh,
problems. And there's hundreds of them. So I can't go down that path of saying this tool routes conduit, this tool routes pipe. Like it's just not how we're operating because I need something that works on top of all our data and optimizes conduit against pipe because they're in the same space.
I see. So we
So
need
there's
like
probably something.
verticals as.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. This is a
We
big
might be
issue.
unique. We might be
Yeah.
unique because we're trying to build our own tools. And if you weren't, I think that's a different situation.
I see. So what's your piece of advice for mid-size firms or small
Mm,
firms?
That's hard. That so I don't know where the cutoff is, but there is some point below which it gets kind of scary because as things get automated, what I would worry about is that I would just become a broker for work. Like I go win a project and then I pay fees to run someone's software and I make margin on the difference. And everybody who's using that software will compete. Like the margin will stay the same as it is now. The fees will come down and then you're just
Oh,
making margin on that software. And the person who makes the money is the software company. So I'd worry about that if I was a small or a medium sized firm. I think we're on the high end of medium sized. So I still worry about it. Um, I think what you can do is have organized workflows and understand why you're using tools. And then I hate to say it, but that at least makes you an appealing acquisition target if things don't go your way. Because what you don't want to do is have a really messy workflow and totally messy data that is actually a liability for somebody to acquire because they have to sort out all your data and figure out what you've been doing, right? Like you want to have a very organized way of working and then find tools that make that faster. And then maybe you discover something that everybody else wants to buy and you go from small to large, that could happen.
right. Any tips for adoption? I've seen like
Mm.
from design and construction, adopting new software or within internal tools adoption is a challenge.
It's a super hard challenge. It's not have the best idea. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what my approach is that people resist because they don't have a shared vision about what's possible. So it seems like you're trying to accomplish a different thing than they're trying to accomplish. And so I spend a lot of my time explaining what's possible and then how these steps contribute to that possible hopeful future. And it has to be detailed. Like I just gave a presentation to our company around these are the types of functions we're building. These functions can go together into services. You can call these services in this platform. So when we're testing a function with you, it matters. It's not just me trying to automate your workflow. It's me trying to figure out, is this the right function? So it doesn't
Mm,
matter if it made you faster because we're going to run it a million times, which is of course faster than you doing it a million times. What matters is it right? So test this with me because we're going to put these things together and we're going to build these services and then we'll have this whole design hub where we can work with our data, with Revit, and with these functions that we can call through these services we create. And then I think the more I get people to understand this is a long haul project with a lot of steps and how they can see that their work contributes to that project, then more and more people get on board. I think if you just say, I made a tool that did this thing, they would say, well, I don't work that way. And then you're at an impasse because they don't understand why you want them to use it. Everything then gets put through the lens of, does this make me faster? And that's a friend of mine, Zuby, like put a thing on Azubike. He put a thing on LinkedIn that says, whose problem are you trying to solve? Because if it's yours, your clients don't want to pay you to solve your problem. They want you to pay you to solve their problem. So I'm trying to get people to understand all of our tools are set up to solve client problems, and it might actually make somebody's job harder. But in the end, our product is a lot better. And so then that's a win. Like that's what clients are paying us to do, is have a better product, not be faster. Yeah.
I see. But if you were to suggest concrete or actionable items uh, for someone who wants to work internally with their team for better adoption, what would be three things you recommend?
Understand the workflow, which is a hard question. So why do designers do the steps in the order they do them, is a key question. And that's probably poorly defined. And so it's a lot of work to map out a workflow. That's very loopy. It's just does a lot. But if you can understand the workflow, then you can communicate to them and how they need to change. And then I'd say understand the product and understand like what are people using these tools to make, and then is that actually answering the client need, or is that just what has always been done, right? Like is it digital paper, or is it like a real digital product that a client wants to buy and it's offering value above paper? And then you can work backwards and say, oh, there's a change to this workflow. Like if you could change your workflow here, it creates this really innovative product at the end, and we can add all this value, and then you can help designers see how they contribute to this gain for the client. So understand the workflow, understand the product, and then understand the math. You can't, engineers will not tell you the problem statement in clean equations. Like I've noticed like our equations come in with like conversion factors in them and things that it's like, why did you divide by 60? Like, why didn't you just put this in minutes instead of, it's like this equation is like 60 is not in the equation. So if you do that, it's going to mess up a whole bunch of other stuff. And so, but if you don't understand that, you can't ask real questions. And I noticed that's a deficiency. If you don't have domain expertise, you can't say like those, you put this in weird units. Why'd you do that? And engineers will say, oh yeah, I forgot. Like we just always work in Fahrenheit, but that equation's in Rankine, and I just didn't do that. So understand the workflow, the product, and the equations.
Amazing. All right. I'm gonna go to the last section of the interview, which is rapid fire round, and you'll have very brief moment, and you gotta keep it super short.
Yeah, I
So
can do that.
let's do. Dustin, who's your role model?
My role model. This I just posted about it this morning. So this is Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut. Short answer.
Yeah. A book which made a big impact in your life.
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Your favorite movie.
Oh gosh, that's tough. Probably Grand Budapest Hotel.
Your most inspiring like MEP systems, which motivates you.
I worked on SoFi Stadium in LA, which is inspiring because there's no air conditioning in the bowl. So it does not exist, was the inspirational part. It was a lot of work to not have air conditioning.
I see. A city which is in your travel bucket list.
I have never been to Paris. We've been talking about doing that. That would be good.
Eh,
I just went to
Three
Madrid. That was great.
Nice. Three words your friend or family would describe you.
Um, uh, Three words I hope they would use to describe me. I think they would say I'm a reader. I read a lot, and I am analytical, like logical, and then hopefully they would say I am patient. I try to be patient.
Yeah. Any mentor which helped you?
That's there's like 1,000 of them. So I always think that's a hard question because everybody influences you in a certain way. You know, and it's like a thing they do that you didn't realize you should be doing. It's not this person is somebody that I want to be exactly like. You froze, but you'll come back. There you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I it started with like, okay, it's a difficult question to answer related to
Yeah.
mentors. So,
Yeah.
um, piece of advice to a young mechanical or MEP engineers just graduating out of college.
Uh, so don't stay in your lane. Like figure out where the hard problems are. Wherever you end up, figure out where the hard problems are and just go help with that. That's why my career is so all over the place, is because I just kept jumping into where the problem was. And the great thing for you, if you jump into where the problem is, there's way less ego, and everybody's glad you're there, you know, and you can't make it much worse. So, but you learn a lot by doing that. And then I think the really good, if I've had any good insights, it's come from like learning something over here that applies to what I'm doing now. And you had different knowledge because you used to be over there and nobody else was. Right. So, like,
Mm,
run to where the problem is and just get in the middle of it and learn stuff.
I see. If we were to teach a course, could be technical, non-technical, anything, what would you teach?
So, um, I would, this is a very Buddhist answer, but like a logic, like looking for um, the reality of the situation, whether it's an engineering problem or an emotional problem or like a software development problem. Like, what is reality? To strip away what you're thinking, what your biases are, what somebody's telling you, and like get to reality. I think that is a skill that people really need. So like take the emotion out of it, take the ego out of it and say what's really happening and what do we think the right thing to do for everybody here is. I'd like to teach a course on that. Like, I don't know what you call that, absolute reality seeking, something.
Yes, interesting. Um, I was about to ask, like, is there anything you would have done differently in life? Do you have any regrets?
I would have gotten a computer science degree in 1998.
Mm.
That would have worked out. That would have worked out. Yeah, I won't say bought Bitcoin in 2009.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I,
but I thought I'd honestly really, uh, I loved computers and like elementary school, even like as my elementary school was the first one in town to get a computer. I loved it, and I should have totally done that. And I
mm,
just didn't see. I didn't see what the opportunity was because I just didn't take the time to understand it well enough.
God. Any conference or events you recommend?
Gosh, I don't want to say any. There's a lot of good ones, but I don't want to say any because then I'm like advertising for them.
Mm,
So you can pay attention. I'm not advertising for myself on LinkedIn, but pay attention, and I post about the ones I go to on LinkedIn.
God.
Yeah.
What's your learning source like for
So
keeping? Yeah, you mentioned
it's
books, but okay. Yeah.
it's a weird thing. So books and Chat GPT is really good at things that are in books. So like I'm trying to learn about quantum mechanics, and so I'll read about it, and then I'll ask Chat GPT like, "Hey, I think it works like this. Is that right?" And it'll say like, "Here's what you've got right. Here's what you need to change," because all this stuff is published, right? Like quantum mechanics is kind of a thing. It's out there. So I'm not asking like for reasoning. I'm asking for it to say like compare my thing to what you know about this based on what everybody else has written, and it's really helpful. So my learning style is go find a book about the subject I want and then ask questions and have Chat GPT ask me questions to see if I understand it.
I see.
It's like
Like
yes.
I I read that saying, when you learn something and if you teach it or if you have to explain it, then it
Yeah,
makes the concept. So I'm guessing you're now doing it with ChatGPT.
yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Do you listen to podcasts? If yes, what are few podcasts you recommend?
Um, Man, I'm gonna give away a lot about myself saying that podcasts I like. I think I've listened to almost every episode of Acquired. I really like that one.
Oh yeah, the micro says like on.
They so Acquired, they just go through the history of companies, and it started with the history of good technology companies, and they've kind of just like gone over
Mm,
into companies. It's really interesting, super long episodes. I really like that one. And then I like Ezra Klein, like these New York Times uh, editorial chief, I think. But I like the style of conversation they have because the arguments are very logical, and he'll even have people who totally disagree with him, but their debates are really logical. That helps me understand things. And then I like Throughline, NPR podcast. Uh, Sometimes I think it's less logical, but it's very interesting. Like I like the history aspect of it.
I see. For people listening, if they want to collaborate with your work with you, what's the best way to reach out, and what kind of collaborations you would be open in case? Yeah.
So yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. Uh, Commenting on my posts or having me comment on your posts is to me the most interesting thing. I guess I should say out loud, I do not need software development support. I don't need AI support. So please
Yeah.
don't direct message me with offers for that. We just do most of it internally right now. Just it's a little, I don't know, it's easier and more cost efficient for us to do it that way. But yeah, I like having conversations on there about complicated things, but I probably won't reply if you send me a
Mm,
message saying you have a software company.
yeah. Yeah. Too much like cold messaging, and
Yeah,
especially if you are in the CTO role, like I can imagine the amount of
there's a
cold
lot.
emails you might be receiving.
If you want to get blocked, use AI to comment on my post and just regurgitate what I put in the post as like a comment, and I'll totally block you.
I see. Yeah, but yeah, difficult times. Dustin, is there anything which we didn't cover in this interview and you'd like to end on that message?
I always try to say in these, like, everybody's doing great. So you hear all these things and you listen to things, and it's really easy to think like, man, everybody's doing cool stuff but me. Like, you're doing amazing stuff. Everybody's doing amazing things. So like, I just think we're all better off if we keep saying like, I'm as good as I need to be and I can get better. Like, it's just, there's too much competition and too much like FOMO and self abuse. I just think everybody's doing a great job. Just keep learning and doing, and we'll come up with good stuff.
That's such a great positive note to end the interview. I really appreciate your time, Dustin, to share your journey and thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
It's quite